On this episode of Africa's Big Switch, the ABS team sat down together with Mariam Abdul Kadir, a passionate environmentalist who works with rural Nigerians to reintroduce cultural practice and understanding through replanting projects. We hope you enjoy this.
Welcome to another episode of Africa's Big Switch. Today we have an interesting guest on the show, and she'll be talking to us about creating Northeast Nigeria's educational botanical garden. Here with us is Mariam Abdul Kadir. I hope I'm pronouncing your name correctly, but it's really cool to have you here, Mariam. I'm also will be hosting today with Beatrice. And Mariam, do you want to tell us something about yourself just to get the show started?
Yes, so thank you for having me, first of all. And you pronounced my name quite correctly. My name is Mariam Abdul Kadir, and I've had briefly quite an interesting history. I was born and raised in the UK, decided to go to Nigeria for my university, and has worked in education, facing Boko Haram insurgencies and looking into environmentalism. And it's led me to this point, and I'll share my story with you later on. It's quite a long one.
We have time, don't worry. And now thank you for sharing that very briefly. And so I think the first question is, Northeast Nigeria's first botanical garden. Where do we even start from? Like, how did you get here? Do you have a background in this? Like, how did this start? What was the motivation behind setting this up?
So I have always loved environmentalism, and during my time in university, I was elected to be the president of the Environmental Club. I used to do a lot of marketing practices, like going to different local schools and recruiting them to help with environmental projects. I did a lot of fundraising. And because I was into that mindset, and of course, there's a lot of sustainability trends that are going on lately as well, I thought, okay, there's a lot of deforestation. Maybe I can do something committed to tree planting. And when I noticed that people around me would talk about species of fruit trees that they loved, that they hadn't seen in years, I thought, well, why don't I replant them? You could go to the average, in Nigeria, they have nurseries on the side of the road. You can go to the average one and ask them for a particular plant, and they would tell you, oh, we don't have that anymore. We haven't seen it since 1987, let's say. That was the last time they saw it. Now, quickly, what I want to explain is when we think about plant endangerment, it happens on a localized level, not necessarily on a national or global level. So as deforestation goes on and there's more desertification, it means that particular species cannot survive in that area anymore and will naturally become endangered or extinct in that area. However, you could go to the next state in Nigeria and it could be there in abundance. So that's the issue I was trying to solve. I was trying to make trees, fruit trees that are supposed to be readily available or are climatized to that area to be reintroduced to it, rather than people having to travel or to seek for it elsewhere during our insecurity.
That's really cool. I think that's really cool. So, but was there something that got you to do this? Did you just wake up one day with a dream to, I guess, tackle this issue of deforestation and I guess the climate impact on plants and trees? What was the spore? What got you into this?
For me, it's almost like a sport, because environmentalism is one of those topics that everyone knows is important, but no one cares about. And what I really wanted to achieve is find a system or a way of presenting the issue that would convince people to care about it in a way that's integrated into their life. So I'm not asking them to go out of their way for some movement. Like we see so often nowadays, there's so many climate activists sitting on roads and all this stuff, and it doesn't really do anything. I wanted to find a way to integrate environmentalism to everyday life in a way that isn't preachy. That was literally the motivator, like a challenge.
So you just mentioned integrating environmentalism into everyday life. So what does that actually look like on the ground for the people that you work with and you support in these communities?
Okay, sure. For example, I'll let you know that we had a hectare of land that was lended to me by Modibo Adama University in Yola. So because in that university, they do a lot of research surrounding medicinal cures and natural herbalism, it integrates with their life in that if I plant an endangered species that they could research at a later date, it's available to them, it's in close proximity to them. An example of an environmental project that isn't in close proximity to people is even just, let's say, the everyday ask. If you ask someone to dispose of a plastic bottle in a recycling bin, but they'd have to walk all the way to the recycling bin, and maybe it's not on their way to their class, that would be asking someone to go out of their way to be environmental. Mm-hmm. If you're in a situation where you're already studying the plants or you're already using the plants for a particular reason, then it's only natural for you to be intrigued or for you to feel encouraged to engage with the project. Yeah,
so if you make it easy for someone to do something, then they're likely to do it.
Exactly, yes.
Yeah. Okay. And is there any particular event that kind of spurred you taking action on this project and starting something?
No, not at all. It was just basically the challenge of it all. I think I even mentioned this on my LinkedIn. It does disturb me that there's a huge activism problem within the environmental space, a lot of greenwashing, and I'm tired of it. And I'm tired of the rhetoric. I'd rather people actively do something about environmentalism than just talking about it all the time or the depressing parts of it. So I guess through this project, what I was really inspired to take action on is to just, in a funny way, end the conversation through action. I'm tired of talking about environmentalism all day. I just want to solve a problem that's related to people and encourages them to give back to their environment.
Wow, that's really inspiring, Miriam. And I think it's amazing to see like people actually taking actions and maybe just doing less talking, because we have these conferences that heads of states go to every year and every time, and they talk and make promises, and then we're back again like the next year to do the same thing. So I think it's really cool and really impressive. And speaking of action, so your I guess what you started should I call it a business? Should I call it enterprise? But it's called Plant Revival, right? And can you tell us a little bit more about your business? I'm still not sure what to call it, so you'd have to correct me there.
Sure. So the business is called Plant Revival Enterprise, and it is a social enterprise. I will go into why it failed on that front because I think so many people can learn from this. So the original idea is was in fact, there are medicinal products that are created from these trees, and people sell it for quite a high price that in Nigeria would mean that, let's say, selling 2 boxes of medicinal teas would exceed the average national wage. So I thought, okay, this would be a great place to get people out of poverty, especially in an area where we're suffering from a lot of unemployment. However, there's so many moving factors to it, verifying medicinal teas, its effectiveness, whether it's even safe to use, what organizations you'd have to collaborate with in order to verify that. And it almost turned from something that was going to be a business that would actively make profit to more of a way of giving back to society, as people would donate money to us to have certain trees and plants grown that they liked the sound of that were endangered, to help encourage nutritional knowledge within the community, as many people in Yola actually have their own back gardens and spaces to grow a little nursery if they wanted to. So that was the basic idea. I don't know if I answered your question correctly.
You did. Thank you for actually sharing, in that aspect of telling us your story and what worked and what didn't work. Because I think it's takes a lot of courage sometimes to point out the things that didn't work. So thank you for that. But building up on that, so let's imagine like an ideal situation. What is the value of doing this? Like, let's picture a world where we kind of went and protected our, should I call them medicinal plants? Like you can probably tell my knowledge on this is very minimal, but what is the value of protecting these unique species in Nigeria?
That is a very important question, because what people forget is that their environment is them. Many times we approach environmentalism as an outside world, but we don't know that how we engage with the environment, how we use it and take advantage of it, is a replication of our culture, our identity of who we are. Here's a little anecdote for you guys. When I was sitting with my dad, he would tell me, this was when I was trying to pick the plants I wanted to use. He went through a list of endangered species and he said, oh, I remember using this as a child. We'd use the branches to stem these little straw hats. He'd remember this or that. And sometimes, because we're Hausa from Nigeria, he'd sing Hausa songs that were revolved around a specific plant. And he told me that those songs don't exist anymore because the plant doesn't exist. There's nothing to sing about.
Oh,
Wow.
And like I said, it's so underrated, but everything in relation with your environment is you. It's an embodiment of your culture, an embodiment of your identity. So as you lose these plants, you lose yourself. Quickly, let's think about language. And it seems unrelated, but just bear with me for a second. A person can only describe what exists. So let's say in the Hausa community, or in the Hausa language, for instance, there is no word for snow because snow doesn't exist. You can say hail, but because no one's seen snow, it doesn't exist. Now, that's all fair and good because it doesn't naturally exist in Nigeria. But then how much worse is it for something to have really existed, really been there? And because of your lack of exposure, the lack of cultural maintenance, it degrades. Because when that degrades yourself and your sense of being without you knowing it, you'll almost become, I wasn't going to say whitewashed, but you'd almost become like a blank slate again.
You lose your sense of identity almost, because that is part of what our culture used to be, or what the culture of those areas used to be. And essentially what's happening with time is not only due to things and events such as the Boko Haram insurgency, but also, like you already previously mentioned, things like deforestation, and just drought as well with climate change. So I guess that's why it's important for us to try and take action like you have been with this project. Something that you did mention was you deciding and picking which plants to work on, right, at some point, and you mentioned consulting your dad. So I was just wondering if you could give us some examples of some plants that have stood out to you in your work so far. So I know that the African Regional Standard Organization is looking to do some work to standardize traditional medicine, and are obviously then looking to adopt some medicinal plants from Nigeria, for example. And some of the more mainstream ones that are being considered are like moringa, bitter leaf, hibiscus leaves, which a lot of us Nigerians know as zobo. The zobo drink is made from hibiscus leaves. So are there any others on your radar that you think are maybe star species that are useful and maybe should be considered with the work that the ARSO is doing?
Yes. There's one called Modobia. That's the Hausa name for it. I'll look up the English name, but basically it is used to reduce the blood sugar levels for diabetic people. And I'll tell you, in fact, it's very well known and grown in abundance in Taraba State. But within Adamawa State, you can only find it in the bush, or if you go to the government forestry, they only have one left.
Oh, wow.
And you're not allowed to touch it or cut off the stem to regrow it because they're afraid the plant may have issues. They don't want to lose it, so they keep it as it is. So just from that example, you can tell that there are plants that you can use that are very beneficial to your health, because I think they said it works within 15 minutes if you take it.
Oh, wow, that's incredible.
If you boil the leaves and you drink it, it will work within 15 minutes.
Yeah.
And you have to remember as well, many of these plants solve multiple illnesses. So even soursop, it's very good for people who have cancer, or it's good for cancer prevention. Sausage fruit, you usually find it in the south, but very, very good for people who suffer from infertility. You have to cook the fruit first, but once you cook it and eat it, people have mentioned that within a month or so, they've been able to conceive. There are no promises with traditional medicine. I'm not saying it's a way to fix everything.
Yeah.
But like I said, it's not just the medicinal properties I'm after, it's the cultural interaction that I'm trying to give back to the community, because that's what it needs.
Mm-hmm. And have you so far seen any direct impact of your work and your project on those communities? Or is this something that is more longer term?
It's something that's more long term, but when we did the planting initially, it drew a lot of attention because there were farmers around the university. It's a government ground, so there are people who own farms nearby. And they were pretty amazed. They'd come and say, I haven't seen this tree in decades. Where did you get this from? And we were very lucky in that we found some seeds around, and gardens from around the country, especially the northern part, did give us some donations of trees. But yeah, a lot of fascination, curiosity, trying to learn more about what each tree does for your health. And I'm very happy to say that many people were even considering changing their diets. They wanted the seeds to grow back in their homes so they can be eating from the fruits and just really improving their health.
Wow, that's incredible. And you mentioned a number of benefits there, like, from health to cultural, economic benefits, people can make more money. And it just seems to be like there's a whole lot to gain, right? So why aren't we doing this? I don't know, maybe from you operating in the industry, maybe you can tell us a few challenges that you've seen to standardizing this products. Like, why don't we just have it in maybe tablets, process it and have it in tablets? What has been your experience? Based on your experience, what do you think are some of the key barriers to making this a reality?
Okay, so what I'd like to start with is actually one of my biggest faults and mistakes I made going into this project that many social enterprises and businesses do in general, focusing too much on what people need and not what they want. And it's natural when you want to help people, you always try to encourage the end result that you wanted. Like I mentioned before, that you invest in the environment and you take care of other people, but people don't want that, especially when someone's in a dire need of health assistance. They would rather go to a hospital where they'll cough up the money and know for sure that this medicine will help them get better. Even if they know traditional medicine works as well, the process of trying to, grow a tree and take care of it, eventually, consume it and enjoy the benefits of it, it just takes too long. And people in dire situations are very short-sighted, and I think most of us need to accept that. And instead of selling the end goal, we should sell what people want instead, whether it be a general business that's unrelated, and let the byproduct be what we want to achieve for society.
Wow, I'm stunned. Like, I don't have any, that was a really good response. And I guess another question that I just have to ask, and I'm sure maybe some of our listeners are probably thinking about it as well, is when people think about Northeast Nigeria, so for context, it has been prone to a lot of terrorist attacks in the past. And you've been able to do something successful, even though you've mentioned some of the failures. I'm sure you're kind of underplaying some of the success as well and the impact you've had. But what's it like operating in a region where, because some people might say, well, Africa is unsafe, or certain parts of Africa it's just a no-go area. But you've gone there, you've done something, and something incredible. You've worked with the locals there as well, from the sound of things, and there's even some benefits there. Looking at the security challenges, what's it like operating that part of the world?
What I would like to say is it always seems worse when you hear it on the news compared to when you're on ground. And secondly, when you are approached with these issues of there being terrorism or different kinds of dangers that can step in your way, it usually comes from making the mistake of dealing with factors that are not within your control. And a good example of this is, as Nigerians, we know that when you're in the country, they advise you not to buy land because it may already belong to somebody else. And in that case, it will become a problem for you if you buy land that already belongs to someone else and someone comes to claim it or builds a house on it. It would render your project useless. You could create a forest garden, someone can just come along and decide to remove all your trees, and that's that, all of your effort gone. Now, I specifically approached a university to collaborate with and decided not to buy my own land. Why? Because I know it's government-owned land. I know they have security there already. I don't need to pay for it. And I also understand that they will have a vested interest and will try to look after it on my behalf. And it's not going to belong to anyone in particular. And I think for government lands as well, it's quite obvious who owns the land and who doesn't, compared to private properties outside.
Yeah, anything goes sometimes.
Yeah.
that I feel like that's a very, very interesting approach. I feel like it was very strategic how he went about deciding what kind of plot of land to use, who to approach, and how you thought it would be best to secure the future of your garden. So do you have any advice or insight into how you essentially got this partnership and this support from the university? Was there anything that you had to do? Did you have to give any commitment? How would you advise, let's say, a listener who was wanting to secure partnerships with either private or other institutions in the country? How would you advise that they go about doing things like that to basically sell your idea and your vision to them?
Of course. So this is one of the most important points that people miss constantly. And this goes for everyday marketing and sales. You have to give people what they want. And the problem is that we become so invested in our ideal world, what we want to happen, that we ignore potential partnerships and what people actually desire. Whenever you embark on any business, you have to make sure that you remove as much luck and chance from it. And that's when you see success. If I specifically chose Modibo Adama University, because I know that they do research on herbal medicinal plants, it would not have the same effect if I approached the university I graduated from, which is American University of Nigeria. They don't do that, so they don't care. And it's no fault of their own. They're not a nasty institution, but you can't expect people to engage with you if it's a message market mismatch. You need to take the responsibility and understand what your market wants. If you fit the bill, if you're the right person to approach them, because more than likely they'll say yes. And I will challenge people on this to do their proper research whenever they look to other companies. They will know that they are the right fit. And 9 times out of 10, the response you'll get is yes.
I like that. Be courageous, be strategic, and just go for it. I like that one. And a question for me is, so what is next? What are you thinking, or where are you thinking of taking plant revival? Because there's so many ways you can go about this, and I'm just looking forward. I mean, I'm excited to hear where this is going to go next. Are you thinking of expanding beyond the northeast of Nigeria to around Nigeria, or even maybe wider into like other countries in Africa? Where are you looking to take this, Miriam?
You know what? That is a very interesting question, because I wanted this project to be almost the Disneyland of Africa. And it's because it was partially inspired by one of my co-founders' colleagues who passed away. He used a traditional medicine that he didn't know how to use properly called Tumpapia. I will find the English versions, don't worry. And it's a plant where you can wrap the leaves around your foot, and it helps lower your blood sugar levels if you're diabetic. Now, they always advise, do not do this method if you have wounds on your feet. And he did that method and he got blood poisoning and passed away. So I wanted this vision of an educational garden where, unfortunately the victim would be the face of it, and just showing people how important education around traditional medicine is, allow people to re-engage with their culture. But the plan now is to actually dismantle the whole thing. I'm going to rebuild the whole version of Plant Revival Enterprise, using all the mistakes I've made so far, and actually create a self-sustaining business, not something that I'd have to fundraise for anymore. I'm very appreciative of my donor group but I want a self-sustaining, strong business that does have that same end goal, but then it's going to really give a good cause in society and good changes in society that will be profitable enough to feed into that vision.
Yeah,
Wow.
I think that self-sustainability is very critical and important, because sometimes fundraising can start to be a block or a barrier, and when it starts to slow you down. So I think that's important, as well as even if it's in addition to the fundraising. So I would just come in with kind of a question for our listeners. What do you think is maybe the most important message that you'd like to pass on about just preserving biodiversity and the importance of this type of work?
I think the most important thing that I'd like to mention about biodiversity is that it's not, earlier we talked about biodiversity being connected to culture and identity. And what I'd like to extend to it is that it's a representation of a story of different kinds of people. So there's a way that we connect with the environment culturally, but we all have our own story as well when it comes to how we use things and how we feel about where we were raised. And it gives this artistic nostalgia to the whole process, in my opinion. It's almost like how someone can hear a song and remember an era of their life, or someone can smell something and it takes them back to a particular place in their life. I think environmentalism and biodiversity does the same. When you remember a certain animal that you don't typically see in an area, or maybe you're used to seeing it back at home, it will bring you back home mentally. And it's a funny way of putting it, but I think environmentalism and nature is a form of art because it brings you back home.
Oh, wow, that's incredible. Nature is a form of art because it brings you back home. Thank you so much. That is very profound. It's been really lovely listening to you about your project, about what you've been up to, about how you got here, how you strategically went about securing your partnership with the university, by making sure that it's essentially something that was important to them. We're starting to wrap up now, and we do have one question that we usually ask our guests. And I actually have a bonus one after that as well. So a bonus for the bonus. But
okay.
the initial question is, if money wasn't an issue, if you were to go to any country in Africa, which country would it be and why? And the other one I'll add in there actually is, if you could recommend any town or city or even village in northeastern Nigeria, where would it be?
Okay, so for the first question, my answer is Namibia, because I've seen how they've managed life without water, and I think it's really fascinating. I just want to see, it's a test of human skill when you lack something so much. You want to see how you manage your day-to-day. Water's everywhere for us in most parts of the world. So if you don't have it, then how do you manage? I'd like to see people who are tested. So, and for the next question, I actually say come to Yola. Yola's a very, very nice town, in my opinion. Maybe I'm biased, but I like it.
I agree. I agree. Good.
You've
Yola
been,
is
haven't you?
beautiful. I have. It's beautiful.
It's lovely, yeah. Even the rivers, it's very close to Cameroon. I used to go on field trips and we would trek on the mountain range and we would just point at Cameroonian villages on the other side. It was really nice.
Yeah, but go in when it's like cool though. Don't go when it's too hot.
Don't. This time of year it will kill you. The sun will.
Alright, okay. So when's the better time to go? Yola.
October, maybe September, October is fine. Yeah.
Okay. Just when
Yeah,
does it
during
rain?
the rainy
Just
season.
after when
Yeah.
it's okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Cool. No, that's good to know. I've never really been to northern Nigeria. The northernmost I've been is Abuja from the southwest. So I'll definitely keep that on my list.
Can I mention one more thing before we go?
Sure. Go on.
So for anyone who's listening, please feel free to message me on LinkedIn, because I have a PDF that I'd like to share on all the mistakes I've made marketing within social enterprise, and it will help people who are professionals as well, who want to know how to present themselves better and get quicker results. Not everything in business is about patience. Sometimes you're taking the wrong steps. And that's why things aren't happening. So I'd love to share that with you guys. And also, if you could put my email as well, if anyone has any personal questions, I'd be really willing and happy to answer them.
Of course. Thank you very, very, very much for that. And yes, everything will be on our podcast. And it's been great. It's been great hearing about this enterprise and what you're doing. It's incredible. And I'm actually excited to see where you take this. I'll be following closely to see how this transitions.
Now I have to live up to something, but okay.
But yeah,
thank you so much for having me.